Welcome to Crochet Yap, where I stitch away and we'll dive into some of the funniest, weirdest, and most thought-provoking questions from the internet, along with people's replies. But that's not all. I will also explore some interesting discussion questions. Some are crochet related and some are completely random. Because let's be honest, sometimes the internet asks the most bizarre things. And of course, the replies are even better. So grab your yarn, get comfy, and stitch along with me, or just sit back and enjoy the conversation. Let's get into it. So for our first Crochet Yap episode, I thought it was only fitting that I turn to the famous crochet subreddit, pose a question, and see what people think. So I asked, what are your hottest or most controversial crochet takes or opinions? And I prefaced this saying, we listen and we don't judge. I got about 35 replies, so let's start with the first one. One user said, the random acts of kindness of leaving little crochet plushies around is just another form of littering. No one wants a doll they found outside. And another user commented to this post saying, does anybody else remember that one episode of House where a bunch of babies got sick from a volunteer who was giving away teddy bears while ill? That's what I think of when I see, oh, I left this in the hospital room waiting to bring a little cheer. So I personally haven't watched House, but I do work at the hospital and I can see how leaving these little plushies around could be a source of germs or bacteria. And I do agree that leaving these plushies around is a little bit of a waste because not everybody really appreciates them, or not everybody understands what they are or what they are for. So maybe if they see one, they'll just throw it away, and that adds to the waste. But what do you think about this comment? Do you agree that it's a form of littering, or do you disagree? Leave a comment down below. So moving on to the next comment or the next reply. Calling yourself a hooker isn't cute or edgy. It's unoriginal and tiresome. I do agree. I have seen so many shirts or crochet merch that says something along the lines of being a hooker for somebody who uses crochet. And I guess it is unoriginal and tiresome, but I think that it could also be cute in the right context. Moving on, another user commented, I'm anti-Etsy pattern. Put it on your own site or put it on Ravelry, but for the love of God, I wish people would stop using Etsy as their main source to find patterns. And then somebody replied to this comment saying, I've seen that Yarnspirations has thousands of free patterns if you sign up for their emails, I think. So this is an interesting comment. I do understand the bad rep that Etsy gets because I've heard that they charge high fees for listing on their platform. And it might be cheaper to put it on Ravelry, I'm not sure. But I know that if you put it on Etsy, then that gives you a wider audience since there's already millions of people shopping on Etsy. And I can see why, as a beginner, you would want to put your items or patterns on Etsy just so you don't need to go find customers from scratch. But personally, I rarely buy patterns from Etsy. It's only when I can't find a free video or a free pattern on the internet somewhere, and if it's a gift or if it's something that I need to make fast, then I will consider buying from Etsy, but it rarely happens. Next comment, somebody said, those bulky blanket yarns are the fast fashion of the yarn world. People make things quickly that will just as quickly get thrown away or fall apart. And then somebody replied, I cannot express how much I hate plushies made of it. They all look like slightly different shaped blobs. So I think they're referring to burlap blanket or other brands of chenille yarn. I think this is an interesting take. When I was starting crochet, I definitely wanted to get my hands on a lot of these blanket yarns, but now that I've had some time to work with them, it's not my favorite yarn to use, and I tend to avoid them and opt for other options. Now moving on, another Redditor said, beginners need to start with basics first. Learn about different types of stitches, yarns, hooks, etc. I see too many. I just started 5 minutes ago and I'm starting with a super advanced sweater and can't count stitches. This is coming from a beginner, LOL. And then somebody said that is so frustrating. I really do agree that as a beginner, it's great to have a good foundation of the basic stitches, as well as understand what the different types of yarns. There's so many different brands out there, different materials, different weights, and it takes a while to understand what each yarn is best for what project. And I've definitely made the mistake of buying yarn just because it looks pretty, but it wasn't a perfect match for the project I was working on, and I had to learn that the hard way. But I think that crochet is gaining more popularity from what I can see on social media, and the trend of saying you're going to start a very advanced sweater as a beginner gets people more views, which is kind of clickbaity, or I believe that's the reasoning behind it. Moving on, another user commented, yarn snobbery, while it exists, is less common than people complaining about yarn snobs. I can count on two hands how many times I've seen or experienced actual yarn snobbery, but every single video of crochet and knitting hot takes, and there are a lot of them, has a rant about yarn snobs. I also think people often confuse legitimate criticism of certain yarns as snobbery. So yarn snobbery, if you're not familiar, some crocheters or knitters tend to avoid synthetic yarn and only go for natural fibers, but they tend to be more expensive and is not as available as acrylic yarn or polyester yarn. But I haven't had my fair share of exposure to yarn snobbery, so I can't say too much about this topic, but I would love to hear your thoughts. Another user commented, I don't center pull ever, it's too risky. There's a few replies to this. So one user said, I've never understood the hype. It seems like it's more liable to make a mess. You just can't wrap the yarn up if you need to frog a large section, and I keep seeing tangled yarn barf next to crying face emojis. The only time I can think this could be needed is if you're using one of those cakes that transition from one color to another and you want to start with the middle color rather than the outer color. So to this comment, another user replied saying, I fully respect this, but my take is that I love messy center pulls. Taking out a massive chunk of a mess makes me excited to crochet it all, and then at the end of it, end up with a clean center. That's how I see it. Another comment to that comment, I'd probably just wind it so the inside was outside, and I don't have a yarn winder. That's how much I don't understand a center pull. Another user commented that they tried their first center pull on their last project and it will be their last, LOL. I find this hot take funny. I used to not do center pulls because I would have a really hard time finding it, and because I was a beginner, I would keep frogging the projects I've made, so it was just easier for me to pull from the outside, and if I had to frog, I can easily wrap the yarn I've used around the skein. But as I've gotten more confident finding a yarn barf that contains the center pull, I've been doing center pulls more often, and I also got myself a yarn winder, which makes it a lot easier to do center pulls. I still have my fair share of yarn barfs and tangles that I have to deal with, but I do find it easier to work on a project if my yarn is a center pull. Moving on, another user commented their hot take saying, despite experienced crocheters often sticking out their noses, and at this take, traditionally written patterns are hard to read for many people, and it's fine to prefer videos or other easier to read style patterns. I do agree that traditional written patterns are easier or hard to understand, and people have different learning styles, so it's okay to prefer videos or pictures over written patterns. And when I was a beginner, I learned a lot more from watching videos, and having built that foundation, I am now more comfortable reading patterns. But from time to time, I still find myself going to YouTube and looking at a tutorial to see how a particular stitch is done, or how I should change colors when working with new yarn. So yeah, I agree. So another user's hot take: disaster victims don't need nor want your donations. They need money. And somebody contradicted, saying, I could see having something to crochet being comforting to some folks. This is definitely a controversial take. I can see where this person is coming from. This was posted around the time of the wildfires in California, so I do understand the sentiment that money is more important than receiving a crochet item. I think context is very important. Let's say you're donating blankets or hats or scarves to homeless shelters, then in that case, I am sure these donations are appreciated just as much as if it was a monetary donation. But in terms of natural emergencies like fires or floods, then I can see that monetary donations would be more helpful in the short term. Another crocheter's hot take: I don't understand why I have to start every granny square round with a chain instead of just double crocheting into the corner. It seems silly and I'm likely wrong, but I'm stubborn. To this person's comment, somebody replied, look up the standing double crochet. It looks identical to a regular double crochet. I'm not too familiar with granny squares, so I can't really comment on this hot take, but if you do agree, or if you think there's a better way, leave that down in the comments. Another hot take about granny stitch: somebody said, I personally really dislike the look of granny stitch, and even more the look of those granny stitch granny square garments. I just find them really ugly. And then somebody said, the stupid Taylor Swift dress. My reaction was, girl, that is ugly and you forgot your pants. I think granny stitches or granny square garments can look really good if done in the right pattern, or if you use the correct color combinations. I have a few projects that have granny stitches or granny squares that I want to do at some point in the future, and I like them. I found them pretty because of the color that was used and the pattern or how they were done. So yeah, that's my take on that. Another hot take: I think crochet is much easier than knitting and is therefore less impressive than knitting, but they are both equally fun. I only crochet, so I can't say much on whether it is easier than knitting, but I don't think that it's less impressive. I've seen so many talented crocheters make everything and anything from crochet just based on their talent, and some of them have done it without a pattern. They just freehanded it, and I'm always in awe of the talent these people have. So I don't think it's less impressive, but it is very fun. I one day hope to learn how to knit when I have more time in the future, but I know a lot of you guys crochet and knit, so let me know what you think about this hot take. Another hot take that got a lot of downvotes, one user said Americans ruin crochet by changing the names of the stitches, making it confusing to follow patterns. Also, by changing the way they hold the hook and yarn, it's a lot harder for people to learn, especially children. So this was something I learned when I started crochet, that the US and UK versions are different, which I'm not really sure why. For example, a double crochet in the US would be a treble crochet in the UK, and it's always specified in patterns or videos whether it's in UK terms or US terms, so there's no confusion, but I'm not really sure why there's a difference. Crochet patterns always point out whether they're using US and UK terms, so there's shouldn't be too much confusion on it. I personally haven't encountered too many patterns that are in UK terms, so I can't comment on how many of them are out there, but let me know what your thoughts are on this hot take. Those are all the comments I got when I asked Crochet Reddit the question. Some of them were pretty repetitive, especially when it came to the magic circle or the granny stitch or doing a center pull, so I just skipped those ones. Thank you guys for tuning in. This is my very first Crochet and Yap video, and it might sound a little rough since it's my first time and I'm still getting used to reading and sharing my opinions or my thoughts, so bear with me as we go through growing pains. Thank you so much for listening and taking time out of your day to spend some time with me. If you agree with any of these comments or have a different opinion, please let me know in the comments down below. I will also post the link to this Reddit discussion in the description, so you can check it out if you feel like it. I'll definitely be doing more of this series, and I have a few questions queued up that I'd like to share and see what you guys' thoughts are, so I hope you stay tuned. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you guys have a wonderful day.